Well, my name is Antonio Di Lorenzo. As you have seen, I'm from the University of Uberlandia in Brazil. Just so you know where I am, it is here inside the circle. Um, and you can see Rio de Janeiro, in Sao Paulo, and Brasilia, which are the most known cities, I think. I am Italian, but I live in Brazil since I've been living in Brazil since 12 years. So here is an outline of my talk. The first thing, I will define what is free will, according to me. And I will define three properties which I think characterize fully free will. Incidentally, I will talk if the unpredictability has classical or quantum roots, and then I will discuss if artificial intelligence can have free will, and also some ethical consequences of the point of view I will expose, which is not far from Mark Hadley point of view, I think. So, well, I think we are all physicists, or almost all here. So we like to start with simple models. And there is a famous joke in physics about a physicist solving a problem for a farmer, but only worked for chickens in a frictionless vacuum, spherical chickens in a frictionless vacuum. So that's where I start. I assume that humans or agents are spherical and they are in a frictionless vacuum. So it's clear that here there is no way there is free will, because the movement of the sphere is fully determined by the outside forces. So if you apply force, it will go in a certain direction. If you apply a torque, it will spin. The sphere in itself cannot do anything. So let's start adding a layer of complexity. So let's have an ordinary human with 2 arms and 2 legs in a frictionless vacuum too. What we have here is that what the human can do that reveals is free will is moving its body parts in relation to each other. But if you push him, because you are in a frictionless vacuum, he has no alternative but go in the direction where you push them. And then let's add yet another layer of complexity. Let's say that this human in space has a stock of pebbles with him. So now he has more options. He can throw a pebble in one direction, so he can move in the opposite direction. He can rotate as he wishes by throwing the pebble at a certain distance from its center of mass. So you see that the more complex the environment, the more options we have. And then let's go back to Earth and let us examine a basic example. Walking around. When I walk around, what do I do? The floor applies a friction force on me that pushes me forward. There is also air drag, which partially opposes this force. But what is interesting is that this force that the ground makes on me was not a pre-existing force. It's not expressible as a function of coordinates and velocities. It's a reaction force that was caused by my moving the leg in a certain way as to give rise to this force. And I think here that the classical formulation of Newtonian physics is a bit lacking in this respect, because forces and accelerations are simultaneous, which cannot be. But yet another example: a falling stone versus a falling cat. So the stone cannot do otherwise but fall, while the cat can do a lot of movements. If it is close enough to the wall, it can try to break by scratching the wall. It can rotate in order to land on its feet. Okay, if you like alliteration, you could say that friction is the friend of free will. And all I've said so far can be resumed by saying that only in a rich, complex environment, free will manifests in a non-trivial way. So I would say that the first property of free will is that a complex system can move its parts relative to each other. However, this clearly cannot be all, because you can think of a very complex machinery which can move its parts, yet I wouldn't say that it has free will. So we need some other defining property. And it is a property which has been discussed a lot, which is the unpredictability. This is the undeterminism. But I have to say that if you have a system that is completely predictable, then you will say that it has no free will. But also in the opposite case, if you have a system which is completely unpredictable, I won't say that it has free will, because it's just a random assembly of parts. What characterizes an agent is that it is partially predictable or partially unpredictable, if you like. So this is another characteristic of an agent, of a system endowed with free will, to have partial unpredictability. Now, that this is true, you can take examples from sociology. For instance, if you consider a large homogeneous group of people, then you can predict their overall behavior. So how they will vote, what they will buy, which TV series they will watch, and so on. But you cannot extend this prediction to individuals. You can make predictions with a certain probability for the individual, but not with certainty. And this is totally analogous to what happens in statistical physics or in quantum physics. In quantum physics, unless you have a system which is in a completely mixed state, you can predict partially what the system will do. The probabilities are not uniform. So also, with respect to this partial unpredictability, we know that a person who knows us well can predict better than a complete stranger what we will do, how we will react to a certain situation. So this partial unpredictability is somehow subjective. There are degrees of it, of course. So far, I've described free will from the outside, but where does this unpredictability comes from? Because if I consider that the processes that lead to my actions are caused by the physical laws, I can say that if I knew the internal state of the agent with sufficient detail, I could predict its actions. So this unpredictability is a consequence of a partial knowledge, and I think we can agree with this. So I say that I call this inner state opaqueness. We cannot know the inner state of an agent with detail enough. Detail enough does not mean necessarily at the atomic or subatomic level. It means only for me at a level microscopic enough that you can predict with certainty what will be the next movement of the agent. And also, we should consider that an agent has inner state opaqueness relative to himself. And this is very close to the argument that Professor Resnikov was presenting yesterday. But for the agent, this inner state opaqueness means not unpredictability, but rather as options of actions. That's the illusion of free will. So that the system cannot know itself within microscopic details is clear if you consider that every cell that we use to store information is itself a complex system. So in order to predict to store all the information about my body and my brain, I would need a bigger brain. So I cannot really know myself at this level. And so one quick question, is this unpredictability essential as quantum mechanics predicts, or is it just practical? That is, we don't have such a huge brain to process all the information that would allow us to predict the behavior of another human being, for instance. As far as I've seen in this debate, I think I agree with most of the other participants that quantum physics is probably irrelevant here, and I will just point out why. Even if you consider that some cellular processes rely on quantum mechanics, which is already controversial, but let us consider that this is true. It is not clear how this relates to us having consciousness and having this free will or this illusion of free will, because I can understand that quantum mechanics explains the randomness of some very localized processes in the brain, but in order to explain free will, with quantum mechanics, you will need that it work at a coherent level over a large area of the brain, which requires entanglement. And as far as we know, at the temperatures where we are, since we are open systems, it is impossible to that quantum mechanics work at this level. So I will assume that classical physics is enough to explain the behavior of an agent. However, as I wrote here, I am open to discussion. I might be wrong. Maybe some neurobiologists will come up someday and prove that indeed quantum processes are important for the function of the brain. So I keep an open mind on this. So I've said that free will is characterized by free movements of the parts of a complex system and by partial unpredictability. Now, this is yet not enough to characterize free will, because I can think of a machine which can move its parts relative to each other, and it is so complex that I cannot predict its actions, so it's partially unpredictable. I would not say that this machine has free will yet. So I am looking for another defining property, which I think it is the most peculiar property of free will, which is intentionality. What do I mean with this? So I do not want to use the word consciousness, because as it was pointed out earlier, it is very ambiguous. What happens when? Why do we believe we have free will? Because in the eye of our mind, we imagine several possible futures which can develop depending on what action we make. And then we choose one of these actions according to some utility model, as Mark Hadley just said, which can involve just selfish motives, or can involve some other more complicated motives. And of course, our ability to predict the outcome of our actions is limited. The longer the time interval, the less probable it will work as we wish. So, for instance, if I can extend my arm and in order to grab this bottle of water, I will most probably succeed. But if I undertake another action with and my intention is, for instance, to overthrow a dictatorship and establish a democracy in a foreign country, I will probably fail, I think. And there are plenty of evidences in this respect. So this leads me to the next question. Can robots or artificial intelligence have free will? Because as I can imagine a system that moves its parts relative to each other. It is partially unpredictable because it is complex enough, and it can represent the external world, can make internal representations, can project possible futures and act accordingly. and this is how we act. But this is how a more complicated robot can act. So I would say that definitely automata can have free will. So far they do not, but I think that we are very close to it. Just to make an extreme example, see if you have a simple machine so in the which whose brain is composed only by one bit, so that when the bit is 1, it moves forward. When the bit is 0, it moves backward. Then this machine is totally predictable, of course. However, but if I build a more complex machine, which I cannot practically access because it is too complex for me to analyze each one of its bits and predict what it will do for a given input. And if in addition this machine has an internal representation of the outer world, and as we do can consider hypothetical future scenarios, I would definitely say that such a machine, such a robot, has free will. I have no doubt about it. So I don't think that free will is a prerogative of human beings. I believe that animals have free will. Some animals, maybe not all, but they're superior animals. So just to make it a few examples. A chess playing machine, does it have free will? I'll say no, because its representation of the world is very limited. It can represent only the chessboard, not much else. But there is another example which came in the news recently, the Mars Opportunity rover. I think this is an automaton which is very close to having free will. Maybe it's not unpredictable enough, at least for those programmed it, but I think we will soon reach such a stage where automata will have free will. And so now I would like to address some ethical consequences. I think so far nobody talked about ethics. So my point is that free will is, in a sense, an illusion, because it comes to be only because we do not have detailed knowledge of ourselves or of another agent and of the world too. So there are several possible actions.
May I interrupt? Just
yes.
How are you going to talk about ethics without consciousness?
Yes, that is my point. That if you can you be judged for your actions if you don't have a consciousness? I think. Well, if you consider my point is that I will show it in a few slides, that what defines ethics is not our actions, but our inner being. That for me, actions only reveal the real being. It is just a way in which the nucleus of an agent is revealed. In this sense, I think that we can judge. Okay, let me just.
Okay, that's fine. You just continued. Just a comment. Yes. Thank you.
So there is a widely circulating story. I cannot attribute it to someone in particular, but it goes like this: there is a lawyer who is desperate to have his client acquitted, but there is so much evidence against the client that he makes the following defense. So that it says that the client, due to the macroscopic configuration of all these atoms, could not do otherwise but steal or kill or whatever he did. Well, And the judge comes with a clever reply. He says that by the same laws of physics, he cannot do otherwise but sentence the client to jail. So this point is to illustrate that even though free will may be an illusion, it's irrelevant to our daily life. So free will is an illusion. So what? We could summarize like this. And then, as I said before, my justification to make ethical judgments is that actions reveal our inner self. So it's not the action that is being judged, but the person. The action only helped in revealing the person. And this is interesting also. I am not a believer, but I think it is interesting also from the religious point of view. Yesterday, Nicholas Lori mentioned the Calvinism, and I think that Calvinism is has a very very close approach to such a problem. It is the problem of the belief in predetermination. So that's how I would conclude. So the free will is the possibility of a complex system to move its parts relative to each other, and this complex is in a partially unpredictable way. And this complex system, in order to say that it has free will, must be capable of having some internal representation of the outer world of future scenarios. So I would say that animals, superior animals, at least have free will as humans being, because the difference I believe are rather small. Of course, other animals like insects maybe do not have free will, but is open to discussion. There is a famous experiment with a wasp, where the wasp will behave always the same way, even though even though the situation was repeated, it was clear that it would not need to repeat such behavior. So this is evidence that the wasp works rather mechanically. So I would say that from my definition of free will, plants do not have free will, and as I suggest, robots may have free will. Automata may have free will. If I have to summarize in just one sentence, I would say that free will is the way that the laws of physics manifest themselves as seen from inside the self-conscious complex system. Okay, here the word consciousness came up in the sense of self-awareness. Or an even more poignant sentence is free will is necessity seen from inside. I remember having read this sentence many years ago, but I cannot attribute it. I Googled it, but I couldn't find the author. So if somebody knows the author of this sentence, I would be grateful if they can provide me with this information. And that is all I have to say. I believe that most I've said resonates with some things that have been said during this debate, and some things like the possibility of free will and artificial intelligence, I think will raise some discussion. So I am open for discussion now. Thank you. And let me.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Di Lorenzo, for your interesting lecture. And I guess, again, I have to ask you, go ahead with your questions or comments.
I have perhaps a question or comment. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, thank you very much. And there is a question: which behavior could be expected to be consequence of a free will. And I think that there could be something like this. Think that some behavior is extremely unprobable by some general thermodynamic laws and such this. And if this happens not one but sometimes, this could be considered as a I would like to say that, for example, such behavior which is extremely rare
Yes.
can happen. So this might be considered as a consequence of a free will. This is very rough idea, of course.
Yes. Okay. So let me say, for instance, if I think of an acrobat walking on a thin line, right? You say that it's very unlikely that a system, something that the system will do it spontaneously. However, this I think reduces to the argument that we do not know the system with enough detail, because if we knew the internal state of this acrobat before he's going to make his walk on the rope, we could predict what you will do. That is, his behavior will not be so no longer so much rare, so much thermodynamically almost impossible, because our knowledge of the state, if our knowledge of the state was great enough, was detailed enough, I think that you could still predict this behavior and not be surprised. Of course,
it's about
we never reach such detail.
Yes, this is in general. This is a problem. How to define with respect to the black box? What is the free will? But considering the behavior, input-output behavior of this black box, what is the criteria of this? This is the abstract question, because I think there is missing this definition. What is the free will? Still, I'm sorry for discussing.
Yes,
I'm not expert on this topic, of course.
So I think what you're saying relates to the former talk by Mark Hadley, right? This is to propose a test of free will. I do not have such a test. I think Mark Hadley's could be a possibility. Besides this fact that I pointed earlier, that you need communication at some point. And this for instance, could be a problem with other beings, not human beings. But so I cannot say I have a test to state if something has free will or not. Because, for instance, how do we know if another agent has an internal representation of the world? We presume this happens in human beings because it happens in us. So we believe that other human beings are equal to us. I presume it works also in animals which are close to humans, vertebrates at least. We can say that some robots have this inner representation because we program them in this way. We program the Mars rover in order for it to gather information and act accordingly. But if we take the hypothetical alien that Mark Hadley was talking about earlier, I would have a way to say that it has an inner representation of the outer world if I cannot communicate with it.
Thank you very much.
Just a correction there on my alien example. Yeah, it only works if he starts to learn our language and talk to us. It's very difficult to do otherwise. Yeah, but that's not inconceivable, is it? You could send a robot to do that, or you could, if you were clever enough civilization, or you could send one of your leaders to do it. Yeah. Okay.
Hello?
Some other questions? Yes. I'm sorry. Mark, was it a question or was it a presentation? Sorry.
No, it was just a statement, really. I mean, I liked a lot of what you said. I mean, there's quite a bit of overlaps. I always like it when people are agreeing with me.
Anyway,
yeah, I mean,
it's very dark in your room. I cannot see you very well.
Yeah, no, I can't do anything about it. I mean, I'm in my motorhome, and then we've got some LED lighting, which seems quite good to me, but not very good to the camera. Yeah,
No.
so yeah, we'll have to deal with that. Yeah. You're right. I mean, the free will. If it's totally unpredictable, then it's random. That's not free will. If it's totally predictable, it's difficult to see how that can be free will. But we need to home in on something in between that's distinctive, because people think they've got something distinctive. They don't just think they're random or complicated. And I think it's absolutely fundamental that we don't know how we make our own decisions, and therefore we hypothesize about things. And I think that's very important.
And yes, I think it became clear also that the issue of consciousness is somehow related, but you don't, Mark, you don't think so, but Nicholas doesn't think so. I believe this is one of the differences we can gather from our discussions.
Yeah. It's probably, I mean, it's perhaps lazy of me to say that it's not related or not important, but I know as a scientist, you can only tackle problems. You've got to make some simplifications and some assumptions and home in. So I've narrowed the problem down in my mind. It's still consistent with everything that people say, I think, in terms of definitions. But it's only by narrowing it down that you've got to hope to model it. But if that seems promising, then you can expand. And yeah, I'll come back with a model of consciousness, and then maybe come back with a model of consciousness and free will. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I guess, do you have more questions to Dr. Di Lorenzo, or comments? So I suppose we arrived to the end. And well, thank you very much for your presentations and participation.